restarting in 5, 4, 3. Wayne, Garth, you're nodding. Heroic Nation Podcast, episode 23, I think. Who counts these? I would think that the software would do it, but I don't know if it does. I have no clue if it does, and I have no clue with the platforms how even this kind of stuff runs. It is such a technological pain in the ass. I'm sure somebody's listening to this going, dude, you are an idiot, which might be the case in some contexts, and I will concede to that. But yeah, so it's really easy to get on Spotify. This shit's on Spotify, and that was super simple. So I just basically have said that we have an exclusive contract with Spotify, much like Joe Rogan, because between me and Joe, I mean, we're clearly the best podcasters in the universe. So Joe Rogan, if you're ever listening to this podcast, which you should be, because we're in the same quality and class of universal status podcasters, then I'll be glad to come on your show and tell you all kinds of cool shit. So there you go. All right. Yeah, all the 8 listeners that are checking us out. So, but I do appreciate you all 8. I really, really seriously do. You're the best. So, all right. Okay. So today, right, we are talking with Anton Telementes. Anton is my coach, my buddy. I've known him for a long time, since I came to town, and I've been on and off training with him over the past, like, probably 17 years almost. Just seeing him in town when he's here training, and then like more intensively in the past, probably 4 or 5 years for sure, as I've gotten more consistent with my jiu-jitsu training and grappling and that kind of stuff. But Anton is one of the greatest grapplers I've ever seen, let alone trained with. Definitely the best one I've ever trained with. And like this dude, I'm not kidding. The way that the amount of pressure that he uses and the style of his game in jiu-jitsu is so intense and grinding that it is awesome. It is fantastic. So, and for law enforcement, the style that he does, right? Get on top, stay on top. Like, everybody talks about that, but the amount of pressure, knee on belly, shoulder smash, smash passes, like stuff like that. Body surfing is what he calls some of his stuff. And it's like, you don't understand it until you're being crushed. And it's like, that's how you stay on top. Like, you have to stay on top when you're wearing gear, when you're grappling in gear. The notion that you can move on bottom is outrageous. You can't, right? You can't. You have a duty belt. You have a gun that literally will block you from shrimping to your side. So, like, the notion that you're going to be able to shrimp out effectively from bottom, or do sweeps or that kind of stuff, like, it's going to be clunky, uncomfortable, probably painful, like, at best. So, like, that's just not going to be a thing that can occur. But Anton's a lifelong grappler. He loves training, wrestled in college, was part of selection in the Army for a period of time. And not only that, but has a degree in psychology. So we got along with that. Like, the mental game of everything is so huge, obviously. So he incorporates that into all his stuff. He was a college national champ, Ohio State alum, served in the military, like I mentioned, played football, like, just a huge amount of stuff that he's done. So we talked for a long time about all of these things and a bunch more stuff. But yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. So there you go.
Sweet. It's exciting. I love it.
After much setup and jerry rigging.
Have to prep it until at least gets the job done.
Yes, this is the most professional podcast in all of podcasts.
I love it.
I got wires going everywhere. What if anybody watches this, they can't see all the Legos that are behind you.
Yeah, it's awesome. It looks genuine. I like it. It's a real deal. Got the American flag too.
Yeah. So when I did this last time, when I what was about a year ago when I was doing podcasts, it would always be coming from my new and updated studio, which was just my kitchen.
Okay.
And
That's awesome.
and now it's double new and updated. It's just the basement. So
I love it.
It's a serious step. Would you say a step down from the podcast you were on?
Hey, to me, it feels
Eddie.
like it's that's what's beautiful about podcasts, man. It's like you just need a couple microphones, a decent camera, and you're good to go.
Yeah, a lot of times you can just do it with a cell phone.
Yeah.
And if you have a personality that people give a shit about, like that people will listen.
That's in the end how it plays out. You know what I mean? A good voice, or you talk about some either relative stuff or touchy stuff. You know what I mean? It's something like that. Social media people. I listen to a lot of different people, so I always think it's interesting what takes and what doesn't.
Yeah, it's I read a book not too long ago called Made to Stick, and that's what kind of talked about that, and it went through like marketing and like why certain concepts are like quote unquote sticky and why those things get traction.
Makes
and
sense.
It's so much based in psychology and how our brains work, you know.
There's this guy, I can't think of his name, and have to forgive me because I don't know. It's funny because he looks like an Asian dude, but he sounds like he's British or something like that. But he's doing all these, now he's got these commercials because he's a speaker and he talks about tone and how when you want to emphasize something, you pause so people can process it, as opposed, this is a commercial that I've seen in the last couple of days. And then he said, if you start talking though, but then you're talking, you go to the next thing and you go to the next thing, and then they're not really following what you're saying. I just thought it was interesting because he sounds like his voice is it's an awesome voice for radio or for podcasting or anything like that. So I was just like, I'm drawn to listen to him just because he's sounds good.
Yeah, well, and it's I kind of learned that the hard way, I guess. In like the more you try to do social media marketing and just putting content out there, you feel like you have to fill every second with words, and you're very pressured, and it's very fast. And it's like if you just kind of take a step back, it's like just talk like a normal person.
Yeah.
Don't freak out like you're on stage all the time.
Right. I agree with that. At least for me, it works better because if I got too wrapped up in all the camera on you or you're talking, then because I mumble and talk fast normally most of the time anyway, so I have to slow down a little bit and just talk, process, think through it.
I wonder if that dog whining is going to be on there.
Sure it is. It adds to it.
Yeah. I'm going to let him out real quick.
All right. It's Rocco. What's up, Rocco?
Rocco.
Yeah.
Rocco the dog.
He's a cool cat.
He's so old he'll probably die during this episode.
Hope not. Hope not. Hope not. You can last till I leave at least.
Well, cool, man. Well, thanks for coming down.
Love it,
this is
dude.
the first in-person one in about a year. So
Awesome.
So, like, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever, like, I listened to that podcast you did with Eddie, just kind of prep for this one.
Yeah.
Like, what's, I mean, we don't have to go into a ton of your background, but I
No.
think that you have a very, like, eclectic background that's worth talking about.
Yeah.
So, like, give me a timeline from, like, you know, high school, like end of high school-ish to, like, kind of currently where we're at.
And when you mean in terms of like training and stuff like that, or what do you mean?
Yeah, just like training and like major life experiences, because
Okay.
I know that you were in the Army, but I don't really know too much about that, right?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to tell about it from the standpoint of, so after high school, I wasn't the greatest student, so I didn't plan to go to college until like my junior year. I grew up I'm the first and only person in my family to go to college thus far. And so up until that point, it was always play sports. And my dad was a boxing coach for Golden Gloves. My oldest brother was a Silver Glove champion. And then my next oldest brother, he boxed and wrestled. So I grew up around hitting the heavy bag, seeing it, and then started wrestling early. So in my world, it was just like play sports and like maybe I didn't even think about trying to make anything with it at the time. And somebody at some point in time in my sophomore, junior year was like, hey, if you get your grades up well enough, you could probably go play sports in college. And I was like, I hadn't even really thought about going to college. You know what I mean? Didn't really know what I was going to do. So I worked hard to get my grades up my junior year and part of my senior year. I say part of it because I think I still made attempt my last part of my senior year, but I essentially knew that I wasn't going to be able to go directly into. Purdue was recruiting me at the time for wrestling, and my coach my junior year I know this is a little bit prior too, but it'll explain like what I did after high school. My coach had asked me if I wanted to play football or wrestle in college, and I always felt like I was kind of a fat ass in the way of like I was big, 250 something, playing defensive line.
You were
fullback.
250 in high school?
Yeah, my sophomore year.
What are you weighing right now?
Probably I stay around 230 or so, between 220s, 230. Trying to get down a little bit lower. I've been lifting a lot more high rep stuff, and then always doing the same cardio, jiu-jitsu and heavy bag work, stuff like that. But I did my sophomore year. I remember after a 2-a-day practice. After the second practice, I was really surprised because we got done, and you sweat a lot in those 2-a-days in the summertime, and I weighed like 246 after practice, and I was like, dude, and I sweat my ass off. So I was like, I was like, that's crazy. But so after that, I made an attempt to start getting my weight lower, and so I wrestled 215 my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, and then my senior year, I dropped down to 189, and part of that was because I knew I wanted to go wrestle in college and not play football. So Purdue was recruiting me, and they told me that I wasn't going to be able to. I'd probably have to be Prop 48, which I don't know if you know what that means, but that means that I could have walked on, been at Purdue, but only been a student to prove that I could get the grades that I needed to, so that my sophomore year I'd be able to wrestle. And they said, or you can go out to this junior college in California that was really popular for putting out guys that were going to the big Division I programs. They were sending guys to Iowa, other places, but I was like, I don't want to take a whole year off because I don't know if I'll, going to come back after that time.
So that Prop 48, that's not like a red shirt?
No, it's different. It's not a red shirt because you're not actually on the team. Like, you can't practice with the team. So they say you go there to be around, prove that you can get the kind of grades you need. So then your sophomore year, you can then wrestle. So it isn't a red shirt year. I think you can take a red shirt year later, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because I chose to go out to California. And so after that, so the coach from Purdue said, hey, you don't have to come to Purdue after that, but we'll hook you up with those guys out there. And so I said, all right. So I graduated on May 28th. I'll never forget. Like, I graduated on May 28th, and it was either the next day or the day after that. I was on a plane out to California, to Susanville, California. It's an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes from Reno, Nevada. So Northern California. It's not a national JUCO anymore, but at the time it was. So I went out there and wrestled and ended up winning a national championship as a freshman, which that was the game plan. You either redshirt a year there and wrestle a year, depending on how well you do, because that was the part of the conversation was if you place top 3 in the country, you'll get picked up by somebody. You don't have to go back to Purdue. You can go wherever you want. So, or whoever you get recruited by.
Yeah,
so
basically a free agent.
Yeah. And so it's basically you go get an associate's degree and you're wrestling. And it was really cool because they had at the time, like I said, a lot of different, there's a guy, one of the coaches was Vladimir Matyshenko, who was a Russian guy who had come over. His story is interesting because he came over with the Russian team and then he hid out in like a closet, and they called him the janitor because he stayed.
He defected.
And like they called him the janitor because he cleaned and stayed, and he ended up wrestling on the team for a little bit, but then he coached, and he ended up being the IFL, the UFC later on. But it was just really cool, just because there was a lot of good wrestlers out there in inner city. My coaches were from Chicago area, so. They were good dudes, and it was a good experience because there was guys from Illinois, Miami, Indiana. They were kind of, that was the majority of guys, but there were some really high, like people that were highly recruited out of high school or whatever that just went out there for that time to try. And so I won nationals my freshman year, luckily, because my sophomore year as I redshirted, we would go to open tournaments, and I went to Michigan State Open. and ended up breaking my hand. I was wrestling Rashad Evans and broke my hand. So I for 6 months was in a cast, but I was getting recruited already by enough schools that the Michigan State Open was actually a really good tournament to showcase to bigger schools, Big Ten schools, because if you did well, they would see you. So Ohio State, there was an assistant coach his name was Murat, excuse me, Karchalava, and he was actually a Russian coach too that had come over here, but he was at Ohio State as an assistant coach and saw me wrestle, and then he went and talked to Russ Hellickson, was the head coach at Ohio State, and said, hey, I was getting recruited by a few different schools, Oregon Ducks, Central Michigan, Oklahoma for a second, or Oklahoma State it was. Who else? There was a few other ones, but Michigan State was a heavy one as well. But when I talked to Ohio State, they said, hey, we got nothing but a full ride waiting for you. And I knew I needed to get paid for wherever I went. And, 3 hours was close. It was really ended up being between, I was kind of leaning towards Michigan State because their coach that they had there at the time, really good dude. And I was interested in going there because of him. But then when Ohio State, they weren't really talking numbers. They never really told me what they were going to be able to do for me. Kind of the same with Purdue. But the first time I talked to Russ Hellickson, he was like, hey, I got a full ride for you. So I was like, it's easy. You know what I mean? I thought about going to Oregon for a second, but it was so far across the country, and I'd already been out in California for a couple of years. So I was like, I wasn't too interested in, and it wasn't the Big Ten. Like I really wanted to come back to the Big Ten and wrestle. So that's what ended up happening. Came back to Ohio State and wrestled there for 3 years and graduated in December of 2003, and then came home for about 9 to 10 months. Was working at Allen County Juvenile Center, working at some bars. I had a buddy, I came back home after Ohio State. I had a guy on my team at Ohio State who was like a reservist Marine, so I always kind of wanted to know. I always had this thing of like, I wonder what the military's like. So I had been working there, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. People had said at the time, or I don't know where I heard it, but someone had said, hey, if you have a degree and you go to the military for 4 years, you can kind of write your own ticket and you'll be able to get. And so in the back of my mind, I was playing with the idea of trying to become FBI or CIA guy someday, but wasn't sure. I went to a career day somewhere on a whim. Like, I'll go check it out, and ended up signing up. Didn't tell anybody. Signed up for the Army. It was, I'd already graduated from college, so I was like, I'll go try it out and see what happens. So I went into the regular Army and as a Cav Scout, 19 Delta Cavalry Scout, and then I knew that I was going to try and wrestle. And at some point in time, I don't know where it was, I was in like one of the stores and saw a book, and it was all about all this high-speed training, like Green Berets and airborne school and stuff like that. And I was like, I got amped up, and I was like, this seems pretty cool. This seems up my alley, just from the physical standpoint. Like, it was just a physical, and that's always that's really why I joined the Army, was just to see physically what it was going to be like. And basic was, I'm not going to say a joke, but when you've wrestled at a Division I level, it's a joke comparatively from that standpoint. Like, you run and you do push-ups and people yell at you. That's the part. The hardest part is just having people tell you what you can do and can't do, and when you're going to bed and when you're waking up. But I knew better to not say anything. You know what I mean? I chose to go the enlisted route. I didn't go try to become an officer because I was like, I don't know anything about the military, so I'm just going to go the enlisted route and see what happens. So I went the enlisted route, but I knew through basic, I made a decision that I was going to either try to wrestle for the Army or figure out how to go to selection to try and become a Green Beret. So the wrestling thing was harder because it was during a time of war. So
what year was that?
I was there I think it was 2004 to 2008 was when I was in. And so they said no to that initially, to the wrestling thing, but it was real funny because when I was first stationed out at Fort Lewis, Washington, and so they had these like tournaments on post, like a wrestling tournament on post, and I was like, I'm gonna go do that to see what's up with that. So I ended up winning that, and that's what got me. I ended up being able to go train. I went out to the All Army team, which is in Colorado Springs. I was out there for a couple months, I think, and so in order to the Army really has these cool programs called all Army programs, which you can be all Army boxer, wrestler, softball player, different sports, and that's all you do. Like that's your job.
Huh.
And I was like, this is cool. But I went out there and I hadn't wrestled in a national freestyle tournament since I was like 13 years old. It'd been a while. And so I did okay. I was on the cusp, but you have to place top 5 to be all Army. To make that your job, you have to be like top 5 in the country. And so they said, hey, we like how you did. We think that you'll be able to get there. If your chain of command will let you come out and train with us, we'd like you to come out and stay with us, but they have to sign off that it's okay until you can get into the All Army program. And so when I went back to my unit and asked my captain, he was like, I remember, because I thought it was kind of jacked up, but I understood it too. He was like, I'm training soldiers, not athletes. So, no, you can't go back. So he nixed it. Nothing I could do about it. But I knew he couldn't stop me from trying to better myself in the way of going through selection. So I'd already set up going to selection, which is SFAS, like first step in trying to become a Green Beret. And so it was funny because we were doing PT one day, and I had been training, so rucking on my own, running on my own extra on top of whatever we needed to do from a week-to-week standpoint, which wasn't a lot in the way of, training. And we were playing tap football one day, and I went to punt a ball because I played football in high school, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to show everybody what's up, and
Yeah.
I went to punt the ball, and when my foot hit the ball, there was this huge pop, and the people around me heard it. They were like, oh, shit, because I fell straight to the ground. I had partially torn my thigh muscle when I connected with the ball.
Yeah.
It was crazy, man. So it pushed my date back by like 3 months. And so I didn't stop training, though. I had to heal up. It was really weird. But
So just kicking a football?
Yes, just going.
Like you didn't catch your toe weird or anything
No,
like that?
I just kicked the ball, man. I never had it happen before. Maybe it's because I hadn't punted a ball in a few years. I don't know. But, yeah. And
Well,
I don't even...
What it probably was is like pre-existing like stress injury, the cumulative. Because I had something weird like that happen my junior year in high school where I was returning a kickoff and all I did was like veer to the left, and when I put weight on the outside of my left foot, the bone broke.
Really?
So I had a Jones fracture, so they had to go in and put a screw in.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, how the hell did that happen? And then you start looking at like everything that you've done cumulatively leading up to that.
Of course.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, all the hard inside indoor track tournament, meets that I did, putting all that stress on the outside of that, or the outside of that foot, like that's all your turn lanes and all that. And
I think it's probably 100% something like that,
something
because
like that.
I ended up turning the other one later on for a fight that I had here in town later on when I was fighting. Similar situation, but that
so
one
it was the muscle, it wasn't the knee, right?
Yeah, it was the muscle. And so like my knees both look jacked now when I do crunches, and my knees, if you can see my thighs, they look like indented and like they look all crazy because they both are partially torn. So that ended up pushing my date back, but it didn't keep me from going. I felt like the crazy thing was I loved selection. That's right. I'm kind of moving to that point because when I went to selection, it was like I loved everything about it. I didn't really care for the big Army. Like, it's not that it's bad. It just felt old school. It felt like, they treat everyone to the worst of the group. You know what I mean? And
train to the least common denominator.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then we'd go to work. So you'd go do PT in the morning, then you'd have to come back from formation. And we were at a unit that they were just bringing up, 2-1 Cav out in Fort Lewis. So there was a lot of like soldiers coming in. So like you'd always be done by like 3 o'clock with your day. There wasn't a lot to do. They wanted you to clean barracks and stuff, but they didn't have enough cleaning stuff because they didn't have nothing for you to do. Excuse me. So we'd be sitting in the day room at 3 o'clock when they wouldn't let us leave till 4:30, 5 o'clock. We'd just be sitting there. You know what I mean? They'd be like, look at your whatever they give you for basic, that book you give you for basic. I don't know what it's called anymore. But anyways, I wanted to be training and doing more stuff, and so that's what I did. And again, like I said, they couldn't stop me from trying to go to selection. So eventually, I got my selection date, and I went. I didn't feel like I was in prime shape because it's post wrestling all through college. I hurt my knee in college. I had hurt my back lifting in high school, but not horribly. But I still did good enough to get selected out of like 430 some guys. They took 167 of them, and I was one of them. So it felt pretty cool because a lot of guys don't make it until their second or third time trying, because they do the psych eval. They do that. I think it's called the Minnesota Aptitude, whatever. It's
Yeah,
that
the MMPI.
Yeah, so that's what they. I don't know if they still use it, but that's what they use.
Yeah.
And you have to take that test, and then you do all this physical stuff. And it used to be like 26 days at the time that I went. They had tried a shorter version of it where they were doing it for 15 days or 16 days, but just hardcore 65-pound ruck, team stuff, individual stuff, land nav stuff, and I to this day it makes me smile because it was the funnest thing I ever did in the military, in the way of just like physical, demanding. Like you got to gut check yourself. You're out in Camp McCall is what it's called, and these sand like bunches of sand, but there's certain areas that have more sand, and it's just constant physical, mental demand. And that's why I did it. And so I was like, I used to tell myself, this is the shit. And I used to tell myself when I was going through, it's like, I'm going to make it or I'm going to die trying. Because it was there was only one moment in time where I considered the possibility of seeing that people would quit, because we had been doing a bunch of stuff for days on end. And we had this, and they're always playing mind games with you as well. But we were on this strip, probably about a mile long or mile and a half long. They had these actual trails that they put sand in to make you walk in towards the end of like your stuff. And I just remember how every step you would feel your feet sink into the sand, and so it made it like twice as hard. It felt like you were working twice as hard, and it was at the end. And I just remember how much it sucked, and I was just like, man, I could see somebody wanting to quit, like, because it was just, you're already beat up, you know what I mean? And so then they play tricks on you, because after that we were close to being done, I think. But one of the sergeants had come up to me and told me to get in the truck, because they always had these trucks, and like sometimes they would tell soldiers to get on them, sometimes to give them a break. So they just were playing these games, because your team is out here that you're working with, but they tell you to go get on a truck. And so I was like, no, Sergeant, I'm good. Like I'm good, Sergeant. He's like, Soldier, get up, go get on the truck. I was like, I didn't know if it was a mind game. I didn't know if he was testing me. And I was like, no, Sergeant, I'm good. Like, really, because I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be done. Like, if they're telling me that I'm done and I'm out, you know what I'm saying? And B, I didn't want to go sit on this truck if my team was going to be out there doing work. And he said, like, he ordered me to get on the truck, and I ended up getting on the truck, and I get to casually go back to Camp McCall while my teammates are working their ass off, and it was only another half hour, maybe at most. But it was just weird. But I think it was just a mind game. Like, it was a mind trick, because I still ended up getting selected, and it was just, well, you never know, right? It was just one of those things.
It could have been something to mess with you. It could have been something to mess with them.
Yeah.
Maybe they wanted to, I don't know if you were like, if guys were looking at you as like a big time leader in the group or whatever, but it's like, hey, let's remove this guy and see how the rest of them do.
Yeah, I have no idea. And that's the thing, that's part of it, is like, I have no idea. And so I just know I didn't want to. I felt like an ass getting in the truck, but got through it. And then I really loved the land nav part of SFAS, and then the final thing that you do is like a 20-something mile ruck, is what they say. You don't really know. They give you these 4 points that you got to go find, but it's an accumulative like 20-something miles depending on what you get. So you're walking all over Camp McCall you start at like 11 o'clock at night, and you finish at like, I don't know if it's like 8 in the morning, and you got to be done by then or whatever to have a chance. So I got selected and was going through, and that was pretty much where I was at. And then I went back to Fort Lewis for a while. I'd got married. My wife was pregnant with our oldest, and I was back at North Carolina then for phase 2, which is another part of SFAS. And so I was going through that process, and so I had talked to my dad before I went out. I was getting ready to go out in the field for a couple of weeks, and my wife was back here because I knew I was going to be training and gone a lot, so I didn't think it would be good to have her down there when I'm in and out all the time. And so she was back here, and so I just remember, because you could call your family on Sundays. So I called my wife on a Sunday. It was after Valentine's Day, and when she answered the phone, she was crying, and it didn't really. I thought she had lost the baby, and so I was like, "What's wrong?" And she was bawling, and she said, "Your dad had a massive stroke, and he's in the hospital, and he's not doing too well. And so my dad was like my best friend. Like growing up, we were pretty tight. And so it hit me in a weird way because we had an interesting conversation before I had gone out into the field. He had asked me why I was doing it because I'd already been through college. I'd already been a Division I athlete. You know what I mean? And so he ended up passing away. I ended up driving home. It was the longest drive of my life, and I got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30, and my brothers had been with him the previous couple of days. My brother Rico had been by his side, and they had kept him on a ventilator so that he could stay alive. But I also knew my dad, and I somewhere in my memory remembered that he said that he'd never want to be a vegetable if anything ever happened to him. And so we'd made the decision that we were going to pull the ventilator, the plug, and so I had come home, and then they pulled it at some point in time. I don't know how it happened or why it happened this way, but it ended up being just me and him in the room when he passed. So he had been remarried, and she was out with my brothers. Like, they were relaxing because they had been on call for the last 24, 48 hours. I don't know how long it had been. And so I told everyone just to rest, and I would hang out with them, and it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and he ended up taking his last breath. So it just hit me a kind of weird way. It didn't feel like going down that rabbit hole any longer was necessarily, and then my wife was having a real hard time with our oldest pregnancy. So I ended up pulling out. I didn't get a bad mark on my record or anything, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. Sometimes I feel like it was a failure because I feel like I should have just kept going and kept doing it, but mentally and emotionally and psychologically, it played on me. So I ended up pulling out, but ended up at Fort Drum, New York, and I was out there for a little bit. They were preparing to go overseas, but my back and my knee had been bothering me, previous injuries that were just lingering, and so I ended up getting them looked at while I was out there, and ended up showing early stage arthritis in my knee back then, and my back had a pinched nerve bulging disc. So ultimately, I ended up getting out of the Army because of those, because I couldn't keep training the way that I had been, which is just an interesting turn of events. So I ended up getting out after about 4 years in the military, and then haven't looked back. And again, like we were talking before a little bit about our, the knees and stuff like that, and injuries. And I had a major back injury this past year. I don't really know what happened with it, but I was jacked up the worst I'd ever been in my life.
Was that the same type of back injury that you were talking about you had in the Army?
It was on the other side. So it was it was L4, L5 before on the left side, or on the right side. I take it back, on the right side. This was my SI L5, and it was way more intense, way worse, way crazier than anything else I'd ever had happen. Like, I was the most jacked up I've ever been in my life for about 10 weeks.
Yeah, I remember.
I wouldn't wish it on anybody, man. It was brutal, like brutal. I thank God that I came out of it. I had some pretty touch and go movements from the standpoint of, like, I'm a grown man. I train hard. I take pride in feeling like I can handle a little bit of pain, but it was the worst. And I don't take like pain pills. I'm not big on taking a lot of pain pills.
Yeah.
So the first 4 days, I was like, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up every hour. I had to adjust I had to sleep with my leg up and then down, and then I couldn't get comfortable no matter how I lay.
Yeah, that nerve pain is unrelenting because it comes in waves. It's like massive waves, and then it's like, I can't take it, and then you'll be like, okay, I'm good, and then all of a sudden it kicks you in the balls again, and you're like, fuck
brutal.
you.
It was brutal, dude. It was the most brutal. I literally, like, I'm not gonna say I cried, but I was close enough to, like, just because I couldn't do nothing about it.
You can't even stand upright. You don't feel like a person,
dude. I was so sideways, man, and I had crutches. I remember my day job is not like physical at all. It's an IT job, and I was in a management position. But I remember I go to work, and every day by like 3 o'clock, the pain would just be so intense that I'd have to lay on the ground.
Yeah.
I'd have to close my door, lay on the ground for 10 or 15 minutes, put my foot up. But during that time, it hurt so bad that would give it just a little bit of ease. I'd take some ibuprofen because I couldn't handle, like, just to take the edge off.
Yeah. But
every day for like 10 weeks, I would go home and be asleep. I'd go to bed, like whether I fell asleep or not, at 6:30 because I couldn't move, and I felt like a bitch. I felt like it really put things in perspective, man. I was like, man, this sucks, and like I'm so thankful to be able to train.
Yeah.
I'm thankful to have my limbs. I think about, I have a niece that has spinal bifida. I think about, soldiers that have lost limbs. Because you get to this place where it's like, I'm sure you identify with it being, a police officer and then in training, like it's part of your identity, whether you want it to be or not. You know what I mean? When you train, when you lift, when you do certain things, and then you can't, and you really can't. Like I would be like, man, am I ever going to be able to do the stuff that I used to do, or is this it? Like,
yeah, that sucks. That messes with your head.
Yeah, big time.
I mean, it. I look back at stuff and I'm like, I wish I would have been more grateful at the time. You know, like when I was younger, like in high school and college playing football. I was thinking about that last night. I was at a prospect camp with my oldest, and I was looking out there at St. Francis at the field.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, because I didn't play in college the way I wanted to. Like my college football career did not go as I planned.
Yeah.
Right? When I was, growing up in Western Michigan, like I was all area running back, 1,000-yard rusher. Like that didn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And definitely at my high school, which is kind of like, Dwanger, like yours. But so I was recruited and I went there and it didn't pan out.
Yeah.
And then I had 2 or 3 massive injuries. I missed 2 seasons consecutively, one with a shoulder and one with a compressed nerve in my neck.
Yeah.
And I was like, so, I mean, you know how it is. Like, I'm sure
100%.
you've seen dudes that were good in
100%.
college, even wrestling or whatever sport, like pick one.
Yeah.
But if you get shut down for an entire year, like there's a good chance you don't come back from that just because the coaches don't trust that you're going to hold up.
Absolutely.
And I had 2 in a row.
Yeah.
So it was like, all right, dude, you can go over here on
Yeah.
the shelf. We'll keep you around, but that was about it. But even that, like even going through all that, like disappointment, struggle, like I never appreciated it at the time because I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And my value was so equated to like whether you're getting on the field or not.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have just appreciated being on the team and being there.
Yeah.
Because now I look at it and I'm like, man, like I wish I could do that again.
Yep.
And I can't. You just can't. That's just what age does to you.
Right.
I think same thing with CrossFit. Like
Yeah.
the one year that I went to CrossFit regionals, I did pretty well. Finished about 5 or 10 spots away from going to the games, which is like the ESPN stuff.
Yeah.
And I just assumed I'd be back, and I didn't know my hips would go out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I got hip replacements.
Dude, I think
and I
it's
was like,
crazy because you
shit.
look like $1 million, and I'm like, this dude's had both his hips replaced,
Yeah, man.
his knee, but
right.
neck, elbow. I'm like this, but you still get after it. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the point is to your point, the appreciation of it, right? I felt the same way, like especially coming up, and because at Ohio State, you have to, just like in football, there's always somebody vying for the first spot, like the spot, right? So you have people on the team that you're kind of friends with or whatever, but in the back of your mind, hey, I'm gonna have to beat this dude, for it to be my spot. And so it was always kind of weird that way because somebody's got to be the guy that's the guy on the team's first spot, and I always wanted to be that guy. You know what I mean? But I appreciate the heck out of it. To your point, I for a number of reasons, probably another conversation at some point in time, I didn't have the high school or college career that I should have had, which is tough. Like I started wrestling when I was 7. I was like a 5 or 6 time state champion, freestyle state champion. I was a schoolboy national champion. I had a lot of success early, and so, but some stuff happened outside of sports that we could talk about some other time that really it messed with my head, and so I got to this point in life where I was like, I'm not gonna lie, like to that point in my life, it felt like it'd been easy, but it wasn't that it was easy. It was that I loved doing it, and I worked my butt off to be as good as I could be because I had older brothers that were boxing champion, wrestling champion, so I knew that hard work was like could take you a long way.
That was how you did things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was just like you go and you go hard, and so when the psychology started playing in because I felt guilty about some stuff that had gone on and didn't feel like I deserved to be the champion anymore. It was really weird how that emotion and that psychology changed how I approached things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So even though I was a 2-time state champ, 1-time runner-up, high school All-American, I know without a doubt I could have done better, and especially in college. Because in college, I spent my time asking the question, is competition good? Is it necessary? Do I need to win? Like I had all these weird, really deep conversations. Like, what's the point? Is it just to win and go show the world that I can do this thing? And is that the point? Is the competition? And so I spent a lot of time asking these questions and just wasn't. I did all the work physically. I cut weight. I was always cutting weight, which is probably not a good thing. And clearly, for a guy that had a heart attack, last year at 43, you know what I'm saying? I don't know all the relevancy. It was a blood clot, but I would definitely probably say that it had something to do with the way that I trained and the way I ate growing up, but also the yo-yo effect, because I did it for wrestling for many years, and I did it for fighting for a few years, and I just don't think that long terms it has an effect. But anyways, or a good effect. So I always felt like, just like you did, and still was like, man, I could have done a lot better. And that's probably how we always feel and always will feel. But when you know inside yourself that you're capable of a certain level, you've been around people. I've been around lots of dudes that are still around today, that are top of the game, top of the food chain in the MMA world. It feels a certain way, and you ask yourself, I've been around a lot of different people that have gone to the pinnacle of MMA and or wrestling. And so it was just a thing where you're like, I knew I could have, and I had moments where I did really, really well, and people, give you the pat on the back and say, hey, good stuff. But when you didn't accomplish what you could have had you been dialed in, that's why I think the mind is so important for if you're going to compete. It can make all the difference in the world. And also, I think I have this weird thing that I believe, like, for many years, I made it so that I was so tuned in that I didn't get sick, because I wanted to make sure that I was able to compete, or able, you know what I'm saying? I didn't have a lot of days of sickness in wrestling. I didn't have injuries in wrestling until later in the game, like junior, senior year, the last few, because my Ohio State, I was a senior in my senior year. I got to nationals and ended up partially tearing my MCL and PCL in my second match, and it sucked because I was in the match. I was in on a double and went out of bounds, and as he posted and we were going out of bounds, it went pow, and I heard it, felt it. I tried to wrestle the rest of the match. I couldn't push off that leg at all. Ended up losing because of it. And then my coach wanted me to keep wrestling because it was my senior year. But my athletic director at the time asked me not to, based off what the doctors told him. They said, hey, if he keeps wrestling, he could tear and do more damage. We don't think he should wrestle anymore. And so it ended up being that they made the call and said that, or he asked me not to do it, and I didn't really know one way or the other what was the right thing to do. I know I still have knee issues, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't, who knows, man. But I learned and fell in love with the process, you know what I'm saying? So that's my life since high school, college, post-military, has been just to train because I love how it makes me feel. I love to train because it just, I talk about it almost every day. I write about it. I love to get up in the morning early. I consider it my time, and it's weird because I go through all kinds of different things and think about all kinds of different stuff, but I always, for many years, have come back to, I journal about like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and like heavy bag work, because they've made me feel the best that they could throughout my whole life. Like I love how I feel when I do them, if that makes sense. And I know it may sound crazy, but
no, it doesn't sound crazy at all. And when you talk about like asking yourself questions like, why do I do this? Why is this important?
Mm.
And I remember for football, it was like, why is this important to me? Well, for me, it was always the experience, like being the experience, like in the field, in that moment, in that play, with a group of guys who are all doing the same thing. And it's, and it was like, that is what I always want to be part of in some fashion,
I got you.
And
where do you think that comes from? I think it's interesting because, like, you're a psych guy, so it seems to me, because in that thought process somewhere, there's like, you like being part of a team, you like being part of a group of people, right? Which is cool. And as much as I did, wrestling is a team sport, but it's so much an individual sport. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have the team behind you is what people will say, but when you step out on that matter in that cage, it's you against somebody else, and it's a really weird feeling. So the question that came to my head when you were talking was, I'm curious, because I didn't play college football. How is it similar to? I mean, Friday Night Lights is like one of the best feelings ever. Like playing under the lights in high school football on a Friday night is like, It's like a high. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Did it feel that way in college, or was it a little bit different?
It's a little different, just by the nature of college programs. You know how it is. Like college is different from high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the super tight knit intensity of high school,
Mm-hmm.
but it is still very similar, and it because it's bigger. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like so it can't be as tight knit. But the fact that it's like the next level up,
Yeah.
even at small colleges, like
Yeah.
it's still like the next level up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got its own thing for sure. So
Was St. Francis is good back then? Because they've
yeah,
always I thought there was a while there where they were a pretty tough top program. So
yeah. I was talking to a guy last night about when I played there, and it was like I was right at the beginning of. I think they went 3 times to the national championship for NAIA,
that's what I remember then, because
So-
I remember there was that time when
Yeah.
when that happened.
and that was '03. We went to the semifinals and lost,
Okay.
and then '04 we went to the national championship and lost, and then I graduated. But for the next 2 years, I think they went back to the national championship and lost every time.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, so
But
they
they
were
were
like
getting there.
They were like the Buffalo Bills of the NAIA, you know.
Yeah, that's super cool because I know that people around Fort Wayne, especially, like they get behind it, man, and they have a pretty good fan base and people support them, and they're still doing good stuff. I mean, I went to Ohio State, so it was just seeing the fans at Ohio State, like people are crazy, man. It was nuts. I couldn't believe it. They called Columbus a football town with a college problem or something like that. But
right. Yeah.
it was the next level, man. And I always thought it was funny because them dudes were like, we're over here wrestling at the next. I mean, folk style, right? Like high school style wrestling, which is the same in college. It's the elite of the elite, man. It's the best of the best. And so it was always, but you also got a guy that weighs 133 all the way up to a guy that weighs 265. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, but we were always out there grinding. I remember running. I used to cut weight all the time. I'd be running on like a Friday night and seeing everybody getting ready for the game. I didn't go to the games intentionally in college because I couldn't trust myself. A, not to be chasing tail, and B, not to be partying, right? Because it was
Yeah.
just the food everywhere, alcohol
Yeah.
everywhere, a good time. I wasn't a football player, so I was going to be hanging out. And I went to like 1 or 2 they called them Heinegates, because there might be 110,000 people inside Ohio State Stadium, but there's another 50 or 60,000 outside
Right.
partying and hanging out. And it was an experience, man. I tell anyone, like, if you want to experience some crazy shit, go to Ohio State on a Saturday when it's a home game. It's crazy, man. It's next level. But I appreciated it from afar. But I was like, I knew couldn't trust myself. And there was a guy on our team. We used to have a guy who ended up being All-American. He was a really good wrestler, but he'd go to the game sometimes, drink, eat, party, and be 12 pounds over, like a day or two out from a match. And I was just like, nope, I can't do it because I just don't trust myself. I'll have a good time too. It would be no fun to go and just be cutting weight, not being able to engage, and not being able to have a good time, drink some beers, eat some food, hang out with some lady friends, whatever. So I just didn't go. I've always regretted it. I've never been to a Ohio State football game, which is funny because my brother gives me a hard time because he came and he went one time. And every year, being alumni athletic, you can get tickets. I just never have, and I don't know why.
Yeah, yeah. You ever think about that? I think about that once in a while, where it's like, like growing up through when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
My dad was a varsity head football coach, and so all summers, every summer since I was, like a baby, like all we did was get ready for football in one fashion or another.
Mhm.
So it's like I missed a lot of time traveling, having fun, like vacations, like didn't
Yeah.
do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Because it was always prep time,
Yep.
either for me or somebody else in my family, like
Mhm.
always time to get ready.
Yeah.
And then during the fall, you had football and then, other stuff. So it was like, there's not a whole lot of recreation in a sense. Like, do you ever think about that? Like all the stuff you gave up?
Sometimes I was just talking to somebody about that today this morning when I was training somebody. Because I was wrestling's during Thanksgiving and Christmas,
Yeah.
so you're always all through high school, you were in college, you're cutting weight. Like, so I was just telling him this morning. I was like, I remember how I would go do a 2-hour workout because he was asking about like, hey, how do you feel about holidays and training on holidays? I'm like, I always normally train on a holiday, and it's because of the fact that back then I always looked at it like, if I don't go run 5 or 6 miles in plastics and lose 5 or 6 pounds, then I really shouldn't eat this Thanksgiving meal or this Christmas meal. So I would go do that workout no matter what, whether we had a team workout or not.
Yeah.
I would go run the 5 or 6 miles in plastics, which you shouldn't have been doing, but I would do it because I'm like, if I don't, I'm going to eat a bunch of food and I'm going to be even more overweight the next day. So I always, so to answer your, because that's what sucked about wrestling in college too, man, is that you know how like I used to envy football players and basketball players.
Yeah. He's always
Because
trying
you
to
guys,
gain weight.
you
Always
guys,
trying to gain
you guys
weight.
got to go travel to places and eat and hang
Yeah.
out before you actually played.
Right.
We were always cutting a shit ton of weight. Like everywhere we went, I was cutting 5 or 6 pounds. I was wearing plastics.
Ooh.
Wasn't supposed to, but I had the day before I wrestle on Sunday. We're staying in a hotel. I have 2 or 3 workouts that day to just get water weight off.
Yeah.
And so you go work out. There's nothing to enjoy. It don't matter where you could be in New York City. Like me personally, some guys would go do stuff or go walk or go to the mall. I didn't even do stuff like that because I was like, I gotta get my workout in, and then I'm going to chill and move as little as possible so that I can rest until my next workout. I'm going to drink a Fago orange or a Sunkist orange and eat some whatever I need to eat to get to like that 2 or 3 pounds over again, knowing that I got to go work out again to lose 5 pounds or 6 pounds, to drink and eat 2 pounds, so that when I go to bed, I know I'm at a pound or a pound and a half over. So hopefully I drift the majority of that, so I don't have to cut a bunch of weight tomorrow. But the point is that us in gymnastics, and I didn't know this until college, but the gymnastics, like the girls, they have to weigh a certain weight. So whenever you traveled, it sucked at times. Like I definitely didn't appreciate. I went all over the country, went to all these different universities. I love universities. So like even in the Army, I drove down to Florida University to see what it was like, stopped at Auburn University just to see the environment. I like the college feel, like the big college feel. But being a wrestler and then being in the Army, like I went to Oregon University, their wrestling facility, went to places, Duquesne when I went to nationals, but then all the Big Ten schools, Cornell University, and I always thought it was super cool to see these places, but I didn't get to appreciate them nearly as much as I would have had I not been wrestling at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
I cornered Jake O'Brien for UFC 100 when he fought John Jones. This is a long time ago, but that's the highlight reel where John Jones does a back spinning elbow and blasts a dude. That was Jake O'Brien.
Yeah.
And I remember going out to Vegas because I'd been out there a few times for wrestling tournaments, but I had never really been out there just to hang out. And I went to corner. I only showed up on the weekend. It was an interesting experience. But I remember going to the pool. They had a wave pool, and I'm like, this is fun. Like I'm chilling out. Like I'm not having to cut weight.
Right,
I'm just like I'm enjoying the scenery, and it's a wave pool. Like it was just a really different experience. But to your point, like I felt like that wasn't right because I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was so used to competing and training and what that entails. And I knew Jake was having to cut weight. He had to cut like 20 pounds in a week. So I knew he was cutting and sucking and hating life. And I was like, dude, this is cool. Like, this is easy. Like, I just get to chill and hang out and then go court. It was a cool experience. But no, I don't ever look back and think what I missed. I just know that, like, it's certain types of people that, like, you choose that grind. You know what I mean? I think it's a lifelong thing. I think it's I don't know, but I never really regretted it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, I did miss a lot of socializing and stuff like that. And like I'm a very social person. I really enjoy being extroverted and being around large groups of people. But so that kind of stuff, I'm like, man, I missed some stuff.
For sure.
But every time that I haven't had a grind or like something like that, like something to work towards, something to sacrifice for, I get lost and I end up making like bad mistakes in my personal life and financially. Like I'm just not focused. And so it's like it's always finding that next grind, finding that next thing, and really that goes all the way down to like purpose. Like you have to have, like even superficially, like you have to have a purpose and a focus. Otherwise you just kind of float. It's like literally being in a wave pool for your whole life. You just kind of like get bounced back and forth. And at least for me, that's been my experience. Is like you really have to have that. So
I would agree with that 100%, man. I think a lot of my time over the years is spent on that very thing. I've been into, we'll say, spirituality, or I've asked since I was a really little kid, like since I was 4 or 5 years old. Like I've had real deep conversations, like why am I here? What's my purpose? Do we have a purpose? Talking to God, asking questions. So I think that part of, for me at least, like that's even asking the question is part of the reason. But to your point, like that's why for me, none of my kids train the way I do. Like I don't have none of my kids are into sports right now, and it's hard for me, and it's always been, and I deal with it because I'm like I can't. I've probably been too much the opposite where I felt like I didn't want to force them because I knew some guys over the years. I saw guys in the wrestling game whose dads and in like grade school, high school, where their dads were pushing them to be like the guy.
That gets rough to
Yes,
watch, man.
it was really
Like,
rough to watch.
it's like,
And so I went the total opposite where even though I probably should have been harder and made my kids do a little bit more, I haven't to this point, and it's hard for me because I know, and this is the reason why. It's not because I want them to play sports. It's really because I just want them to move physically because I know what being active does for you. So I know what it does for emotion, psychology, depression, anxiety, all these different things that it really, really helps you get a hold of that to some degree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so I really believe that I train and do what I do. I believe that it saved my life this past year, and I also believe that it keeps me sane, man. If it wasn't for training in the capacity that I do, I'd probably be a very angry person. I'd probably do dumb shit. I'd probably, and it's an addiction like anything else, but I think it's the best addiction you could have.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. Now, with that said, like I was actually talking to I had a call with do you know Chris Duffin?
I know the name.
He's a guru with a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But I had a little consult with him for some of these injuries that I'm going through,
Yeah.
like knee and elbow and like surgeries and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking to him about my oldest, right, who's looking at like varsity football and wants to play in college. And like when I was his age, it was always like be the hardest worker in the room, and I think it still is, right? But what does that mean? You know what I mean? So to me, it was always like be the hardest worker in the room equals you have to hurt the most. And for me, for my like my 5'10" frame, 200 pounds, like it was too much. And I think that is a lot of what is equating to like the acute injuries I had in the moment and during the seasons that shut me down for the seasons, and then the downstream injuries that I'm dealing with now.
Yeah.
Is like, dude, you should have relaxed a little bit more and like recovered a little bit more. And that doesn't mean that you're not working hard. It was just understanding like the totality.
I
of
agree
it.
100%.
Yeah.
But I wasn't one to like. I never set out for injuries. If I did, I set out as minimal as I could. So it could be a real injury. Like when I broke my wrist my freshman year of football at the end of the season, and when I broke it, there was like two different nurses. One had been a nurse for like 13 years. One had been a nurse for like 6 years. They said they'd never seen anything like it. The socket that my wrist sits in, my wrist was completely out. So it was like that. They said they saw breaks like that in ankles, but not in wrists very often.
Yeah.
They said you won't They said you won't wrestle this year. You probably won't wrestle next year. And they're like, you may never wrestle again with the type of injury that I had.
Yeah.
And there was never a part of me that was like, yeah, I'm not going to wrestle ever
Right.
again. It was as soon as I got my cast off, I was getting right back to, and that process really sucked, by the way. And that's probably why I train and try not to ever take more than a few days off, because I was in a cast for 6 months or 8 months or whatever, 2 different times, once in high school, once in college. And no matter what you do, you're not in the same kind of conditioning that you were prior to if you're active. And I really, really, really hate the process of getting back into cardiovascular shape because it just sucks.
Well, when you're talking about something that intense, and CrossFit was the same way,
Yeah.
where it's like it hurts so bad because you have to get to certain points with intensity and
Yeah.
redlining and that kind of stuff, where it's like this physically hurts horrible,
100%.
and how much pain can you endure is
Yeah.
is part of it.
Yeah.
Now, if you overdo that, and this is where CrossFit screws things up, or did before when I was doing it,
Yeah.
where it's like you can't do that 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Like you'll break.
Yep.
But even if you're using it appropriately, you're still going to hit that pain cave, right?
Yeah.
And every time I try to come back into get back into like regional or games level shape, or push for games level shape, it starts hurting so bad. I'm like, the older I get, the less I care to go there. because it's like
100%.
I don't need it. This is something I'm choosing to do for competition,
A million percent.
and I just don't have it. You know?
I agree with you, and I've experienced the same thing where, for years now, I competed for a long time, and then I got to the point where I stopped competing because it wasn't what drove me anymore, because I feel like there's a lot of negativity to competing to be the best, like you said, and there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into that. And I'm not saying like it's for whoever is like your Michael Jordans, your Kobe Bryants, whoever the best of the best is. They go through a lot of stuff and put themselves through a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't, and I understand that. But like you said, as you get older, I'd like to stay as healthy for as long as I can. So like I'm doing a different type of lift. Like I'm not lifting heavy like I used to lift heavy, because I always like being strong and being able to say I can bench 420, you know what I'm saying, and being able to, but it doesn't serve me anymore as you get older just to be able to lift the most weight. So now I'm trying to rep. I'm trying to rep it out and trying to get leaner for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm changing things up a lot. I haven't cut weight in a long time. I don't plan to ever cut weight because I enjoy the process. I'm trying to eat healthier, more meats. Listening to Dr. What's her name? I think it's Danielle Lyons or something like that.
Oh, Gabrielle Lyons.
Yeah, Gabrielle
Yeah.
Lyons.
Yep.
She talks about
Yep.
the structural muscles, you know what I mean, and how protein is such a big part of it. And I've done the keto stuff, and I still do. I'm more towards that than I am high carb anymore. I don't do sugar, all kinds of things that I've cut out. But I love the process, and so my point is that I always start thinking, I'm gonna start getting ready for some big tournaments for jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So I can go prove to the world I'm a badass still, make a name, show people that I'm relevant and that I matter because I'm this older dude who can go. And I may do it at some point, but as I start training hard for it, sometimes you get a tweak here, you get a tweak there. And that's what you hear with all these UFC fighters that are older guys that are still fighting. They all have injuries that they're dealing with as they continue to fight, but they're looking for the payday, they're looking for the glory. And I get it, but it's recently, I can't remember who I heard, somebody talked about how like people that they get to that height and they get that victory or the big win, and then they feel empty inside afterwards.
Yeah.
I've heard it over and over again. I don't ever feel empty because I enjoy and I love the process.
All right. So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. So if you go back to high school and college and military and all that, and then even what you're talking about now is being able to transition from one thing to another.
Yeah.
And that's a really important skill. It's a skill. Like you have to work on that because it's hard to do. And like you just said, guys that win, big fights or whatever, or titles or whatever, like they feel empty afterwards because it's like you reach the top.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've heard lifters say that same thing. Once they break records, they, pull 1,000 pounds. It's like, I felt like super depressed the day after.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, why is that? You just did the thing that you trained for maybe your whole life.
Yeah.
And now what?
Is it because we were wrong and it wasn't that important to begin with? Because I've heard people say the same thing about taking their business public and getting $400 million in one day,
and then it's
then feel the next day like they're like, I feel depressed.
Yeah. So it's so some of it is like, and I don't know a ton about this. You have to listen to Huberman to get the ins and outs of the dopamine, process. But like that dopamine and all the neurotransmitters, like it drives you to do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's motivation, it's drive, all that kind of stuff. And then once you go up, like once you don't have that anymore, like you crash and you go below baseline. It's like a drug, So if you take ecstasy or cocaine or whatever,
I think it is a drug. I don't think it's like. I think it is a drug, and I think that to your point, for me personally, I didn't understand that it's transitioning or getting skilled at transitioning.
Yeah.
What I know is that I always banked on. And I've talked about this many, many times, and I'll say this to the point, because now we're hitting on all the psychological things and the neurological things that go on in human beings, and we're talking about extremes, you know what I mean? And so I've spent a lot of time on myself, like trying to figure me out, and so this is why I'm such an advocate for jiu-jitsu training for your whole life, or MMA, or some kind of boxing, like mitt training, like not sparring, not going to do sparring because that shit hurts. Like you get punched in the face, kicked in the face, not wrestling per se. when you're 50 years old, because that's hard on the body when you haven't wrestled to stand on your feet and do takedowns constantly. It's hard.
Yep.
But jiu-jitsu can be a flow and it can be a slow, and the heavy bag work. And I've told this to so many people. This is really when I say I love the process, for me, that addiction, that thing that you talk about, the high, like I don't ever feel the high and then depleted. I don't ever feel depressed after I do jiu-jitsu for an hour. I don't ever feel depressed after, I'm knock on wood, and I hope it doesn't ever change, because to this point in my life, and I've done it for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours, when I hit the heavy bag, I've had some of the most euphoric moments in my life. I don't know why, but I've had these moments where, and it's two things, right? So I say jiu-jitsu and I say heavy bag work specifically, because I got to a point of doing heavy bag work, because I've done it for so long in my life, that you don't need another person when you do heavy bag work. Now, you can get the similar feeling when you go for a run, but it's different.
Right.
When you're hitting the bag, you're releasing stress and tension. And when you flow, because you know how to move the bag and combos, I've had so many times where I get to this euphoric high, and I literally, it sounds super cheesy, but I've felt it so many times that I can't be like just by accident. I just felt like it was my purpose. I'm like, this is why I'm here. I'm here to share this with people. But you can't get to that place unless you do the work, unless you're willing to go and try, right? And so for 90% of the population, or more than 90% of the population, they're never going to go there, because they don't want to go through the struggle of doing the work to get to that point. Does that make sense? But for me, I've had the most euphoric moments in the inside of a 20 to 40 minute heavy bag workout, listening to my music at home or at the gym, when it's just me, my timer, my flow state. I mean, it's been deep and real. And so I always talk about the two books, one Spark, and then the other one is Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi or whatever. Both psychologists, both talked to, and they both did research on ADHD, but both these books have really stood out for me, because they both talk about physical movement and how it lights up the body. So your neurotransmitters you go from being, if you're what do they call it, sedentary, like if you're not active, how it's not good for the body, and how it's worse than smoking if you sit around and do nothing every day.
Right.
But when you exercise, when you just go for a walk, or you just do you don't have to do a lot. You just got to move. It ignites your body like a Christmas tree during Christmas, right? When you turn the lights on, right, your neurons go, everything lights up, and that's what that high is. That's what the dopamine, the norepinephrine, the serotonin, that's what all that is. That's what I'm addicted to, and that's what feeds me, and I know it, and I'm okay with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because to me, it's a good. Now, I always got to be careful, like you said, and where I'm doing a thing right now where I'm doing reps of 200 reps of 225 once or twice a week, because it's light enough that I can, and that's a lot more reps than most people are doing for their, but that's my thing right now. Whatever I do, I'm trying to do a lot more reps, not weight. So yesterday at the gym, there was guys doing a little bit more weight, and I'm listening to them, and it's just funny, because I'm like, man, I could do that 10 times right now, but I'm like, no, that's not what you're here for. You're here to be doing your thing. You know what I'm saying? So you still got to check the ego.
Yep.
You still got to keep yourself in check and get the most out of the workout and get the most out of the training. And that's what jiu-jitsu does, because you got to have somebody else there with you to do jiu-jitsu. You can't do it by yourself in a real way.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk about those two things a lot and believe in them so much, because there's nothing like it, man. Like it's really cool. But most people are never going to go throw a punch or go step into it because of the fear. You know how many people I talk to are like, man, I've always wanted to come over and train with you guys, but I didn't know what to expect, and blah blah blah. Your reputation, but this and that. I'm just like, dude, that fear, that false, what is that? False whatever appearing real, false evidence appearing real.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people that, whether they listen to this today or in 5 years, that won't say, you know what, I'm just gonna go do it, because something inside them is telling them that you need to go do it. You should go do it, right? But how many people tell that little voice to shut up, and they stay sitting on the couch, or they stay not going to do the workout today? They let that get the best of them. I don't care who it is, man. And I've heard this over and over again. And I think it's funny. I know men and women that are 60, 70 years old that still talk about losing a few pounds, that still talk about needing to go lift or needing to get in shape. That's never going to leave you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so it's like, you might as well just get up and start getting after it, because that's what we're meant to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talk about that with people all the time. It's like you just have to pick the discomfort or the pain that you want.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you're going to regret not doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many studies they have to do, like with people on their deathbeds, where it's like, well, what do you regret?
Yes.
Well, I regret not doing more things, not taking more chances.
Absolutely.
It's like that's been proven time and time and time again. And yet this fear-based stuff is, like it just shuts people down.
But is it interesting? Do you ever wonder about why? Why is it that are you built different? Because I know that I had times where I went into a new place that I wasn't known, and when I was in the military, but I sought out the jiu-jitsu places. Where can I go do jiu-jitsu?
Right.
Because I just wanted to put work in.
Well, again, if you look at your history, you have a history of just doing that, right? You jumped on a plane the day after you graduated high school to go out to California to a JUCO and wrestle.
Right.
Not many people do that. So I don't know, man. Whenever I'm taking leaps like that, because I kind of did that in high school, where I was like, I don't want to go to this high school. I want to go downtown in Grand Rapids to this one, right?
Yeah.
To Catholic Central, and I didn't know anybody. I had zero friends, right? And there aren't a whole lot of 8th graders that are willing to do stuff like that.
Very few.
And it was like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? No one's going to die, probably.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down here and I'm going to try to make friends, and hopefully there's some cool people that I don't hate. And if it's absolutely horrible after a couple of years, I'll, maybe go somewhere else. So it's like putting it in perspective. Like you said, false evidence appearing real. What do people fear? People fear the anticipation of things,
yes,
rather than the thing itself.
Yes.
And I'm sure you saw that in selection.
All the time.
I hear Navy SEAL dudes talk about that stuff all the time. It's when do people quit? Well, they quit between iterations of things.
Yeah.
They don't quit during the thing usually, unless you get hurt.
Right.
Right. It's like, I can't do one more thing. It's like, well, you just did 5 things.
Yeah.
What's one more? Once you get into it, it'll be all right.
I think it's selling out to the idea you know what? I don't know if I can say the F word, but you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it, man. And if I'm either going to make it or I'm going to die trying to make it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something you mentioned earlier going through selection, and that's something that a Navy SEAL buddy of mine, I asked him when he got through BUDS. I texted, he was a CrossFit dude from years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets through BUDS, and I ended up texting him after. And I was like, well, how was it? He goes, it really wasn't bad, because he got through on his first time.
Yeah.
And granted, he was I think he played football at Harvard or Yale. I can't remember which. He'll probably be pissed now. I don't remember. But he was a D1 football player and badass CrossFitter, and then goes and becomes a Navy SEAL, right? Does it on his first try. But he said the same exact thing. He said, no, it's pretty easy once you just decide, I'm either finishing this or I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Legitimately.
Yeah.
Either way.
It wasn't a joke.
No.
I knew it's the only time in my life where when it came to that, I literally was because I saw dudes around me badass, in shape. I wasn't peak conditioning for me. I was 226. I wasn't epitome Anton conditioning that I would have considered. Does that make sense?
Yep.
There's dudes that are 170, 180, running like crazy, 18, 20 years old. Testosterone's good. They haven't had injuries.
Right.
They're out there just running circles around people. It wasn't me. It was a grind to get through everything, right? The team events, the personal events. But I do absolutely, because I had to tell myself a few different times, I'm gonna either make it through this or I'm going to die trying. And I meant it. And I didn't tell people that. I didn't tell my family that. I didn't tell other people that. But in my heart and in my head, and that's all I needed, I was like, I'm either gonna make it or I'm gonna die trying.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah, and I think that's common of top level athletes and stuff like that, where it's no, I'll lose an arm for this. And I've been there where it's well, why are you doing this so much? I really don't give a shit if I lose function of my arm or my leg right now.
Or your hips.
Or my hips, right? That wasn't even on my radar.
Yeah.
But even playing college football and in high school and CrossFit especially, CrossFit, you can't move. Once you get to a certain point, you're moving so fast where it's you're working on movement and mechanics and that kind of stuff, because the cyclic rate is faster if you're more efficient and better moving.
Yeah.
So it's not just bullshit movement thrown everywhere. When you get to the high level.
I always heard that, and it's kind of why I stayed away from CrossFit, because I knew that I had enough injuries already, and I was I knew even in college I couldn't do the front squats. I couldn't get my elbows out as forward as I even from a baseline standpoint.
Right.
Now, I know that I probably could have got better and it would have got better,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd had injuries to the point where I was like, man, I don't know if I want to mess around with doing all these reps, because that's what I had heard. I had a cousin that did CrossFit, and he's like, yeah, it's a lot of reps, a lot of reps. And I was
Yeah.
like, I get that. And I was like, I probably could adjust things enough to be able to do it, but I was like, I don't really want to get injured because I overdo that part, because that's what I had heard. I
Yes,
just heard
and,
about
and
that
that's,
aspect.
and that's accurate. If you have like pre-existing mobility issues, especially where it's like you can't get into a perfect overhead position, or you can't get into a perfect front rack position to
Yeah.
do squats and cleans and that type of stuff, but you're strong enough and you have enough horsepower to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where I was at. Like my movement wasn't super clean. Like I got better at a lot of stuff, but when I was looked at like my level, which was like regional level back in the day, like second tier, like not quite games level, right?
Yeah.
I always looked at the difference between me and the next guys up, right? And I watched them move, and I'm like, their movement is clean, their ankles work, you know, their shoulders like get in perfect position, they can stay upright with everything. And then I looked at me and my film and stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of ugly compared to them. but our horsepower was the same.
Yeah, you knew
So
you
I
were still...
forced it, you
Yeah.
know, and I forced it over and over and over again. And if you do that long enough, like you're gonna wear your tires out, man. Like that's just how it works.
Is that the addictive side of CrossFit? Because to me, from the outside looking in, because I've never been a CrossFit guy, I've been high reps, I've done every kind of training that you can do, but I would always look and see, like CrossFit seems to be really good because physique wise, like they look beautiful, like because they do all the reps and they get lean and they get. I mean, you don't see a lot of fat dudes doing CrossFit for a long term. I'm saying long time.
Yeah.
Like that are really into it. You know what I'm saying? But it also seemed to me like CrossFit had a lot of camaraderie. You had both sexes, so you had men and women, and you had seemed like groups of people, and they liked working out together, and they would do their training, and it was like a camaraderie / push each other type thing. That to me, that's what I saw as what pulled people into CrossFit,
Yeah.
because I didn't understand any other way. I didn't really get any, but it seemed to me like that was very big and very real and a very like unseen thing maybe, but people, I mean, I've seen CrossFit people that were tight, like just tight, like they go out and party together, they hang out together, they work out together, they do all that kind of. But I saw it time and time again, not just one time. It was like time and time again. You see groups of people, and it's like their lives are changed. Like women get fit, dudes lose weight. Like it's a real thing.
There's yes. So it's just like anything though. Like you go join jiu-jitsu, all of a sudden you get a crew here. You get a club, you get a culture, you get a like social everything, physical everything. Like it's all right here. So you just want to keep going back. That's why those things are good for you. But you can take it to an extreme.
Yeah.
Everything, right? You can take everything to an extreme.
Yeah.
Now with CrossFit, the big issue with that is like you've got about, I would say, a year if you just start it. Like you got about a year, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the person, but where you're going to make really good adaptations. Every time you touch a bar, it's going to be a personal record. You know, you're going to be losing weight, getting in shape. But at some point, if you just go hard every single day, like we talked about like previously, like if you just go hard and go and overuse and abuse intensity, like you're going to start to backslide. Your PRs are going to be further apart. You're probably going to put on more body fat, right, or just weight, you know, from all the stress and the like overuse of, you know, stress hormones and cortisol and all that. Like you can't overuse that system.
Okay.
Like your hormones are finite. Like you can only tap that well so many times.
Okay.
And then you burn up.
Okay.
Right. And I went through that hard with competing, where it was like after I was done with regionals in 2012, I did pretty good, and I just found another competition like 2 weeks later. Like I should have taken about 3 months off, you know, and the smart guys now are doing that, where they're taking more time between events and they're not training with the intensity. So their shelf life is longer, you know?
I think it's so interesting because I think that is, like you said, it all comes back to our psychology, our emotionality, and our heart. And it's hard to know when to say when.
Yeah.
I had a coach at Lassen, who, big guy, strong guy, but he always said, he's like, people oftentimes they stay too long, man, before they should get out or be done. And it's different for everybody. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's injury. Sometimes it's, you know what I mean? Your body's beat up, whatever it is. It's not very often that you see Khabibs. You see people that go out at the top of their game. You know what I'm saying? Or like a George St. Pierre, like both dudes that are still in shape, but they said peace at the top of their game, as opposed to going down on the backside and your Mike Tyson's, your Muhammad Ali's that stayed and stayed and stayed. But that's psychology more than anything. It's that, what are we chasing?
Right.
What are we here for? What's our purpose? And and I've come to the conclusion, and it's been more recently, for me, that I'm in a very happy place when it comes to training, because I do it because I love it, and it's not like I'm not competing with anybody else but myself, and I'll push myself to a degree and then pull back and then push myself, and I feel like because I have that approach, I can do it a lot longer. Now I say that with the last year for me, I had some real situations that made me reflect and be like, but I'm so grateful to be back to training for the most part 98% of the way, lifting. I mean, bro, I have video somewhere, I don't know if I still have it, when I jacked my back up. I couldn't even lay down on my bench for weeks. And then I started the first couple of times I did bench, because I was working on this towards this 200 thing before. And I just remember like how bad it hurt initially to get onto the bench. I could do the weight, and then to get up, I had to fall off to the side. I have a lower bench that's lower to the ground. I had to let myself fall off to the side and then grab stuff to get back up. I'm like, dude, this is nuts. Like most people would have been like, fuck it, I'm not doing it. I don't need to do it. You know what I mean? But there's something in me that says that I hold myself accountable to, right? And that's why I don't like going a couple days without. If I miss 2 days of training, I got to get back to doing something. Not because I have to. My mind, my body says, hey, bro, go get back to work. Go do something, because I just don't like being inactive. I don't know what it is. But then I look at other people. I got people in my family. They don't ever work out.
Right.
Ever.
That I can't wrap my head around that. Yeah. There are some times now though, like spring break this year, when I was like, you are not allowed to do anything. Like literally, like go walk around and be active and stuff, but no quote training. Like you don't get to go on a run. You don't get to nothing.
Was it hard?
It was super difficult, and and then it starts fucking with your head too, because you're like, man, I know I'm holding water, and I know it's just water weight, from travel and vacation food and stuff like that. But I was like, all right, you'll get it off on the back end. It's gonna take like a week, but it's just water. It's not body. It's like physically, you can't gain that much body fat in that short a period of time.
Isn't it funny though how the mind works like that, though, Anthony? Because you're in shape, you look good, but that still plays on your mind. Just like if somebody who's 500 pounds and overweight by 200 pounds, it plays on them too.
Yep.
But they're choosing to or not engage. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I think too that it's how we're raised, it's how we're brought up, it's what we've done our whole lives. Regardless, either direction. But so much of our actions are built on stories. So you go back and talk about the fear that keeps people on the couch or on the sidelines, right, from experiencing life, really. And it's like it's based on stories that you're telling yourselves, and maybe they're true, maybe they're not. But it's like that's where your perception of the things around you and the way that you construct the world is so powerful. And that and what's even cooler is that once you identify all right, this is how I'm constructing the world to make sense in my mind based on my whole history, right, up to this point. And once you kind of realize that, you can really look at how your construction has been and be like, well, is this true? And then start asking yourself questions like you've done. Is this true? Well, maybe not. All right, well, maybe I just changed the frame, and all of a sudden the construction changes, and now I do go to jiu-jitsu.
There's somebody. So this guy named Stephen Pressfield, and I don't know how much more time you have, but he is a writer. He wrote the book, The Legend of Bagger Vance, right? So I don't know if you ever saw the movie, but I saw the movie and I liked it.
Yeah, Matt Damon.
Yeah, and Will Smith, right? And so I had forgot. I thought it was Morgan Freeman, but it was Will Smith actually. So, anyways, he wrote this book, and I went and listened to the book after I heard him talk. The reason why I say this is because he didn't have writing success until the age of 52, but he had been writing for almost 3 decades. But he has this other book that I listened to called The Art of War, which is what we're talking about now, that fear, right? False evidence appearing real. He calls it the resistance. So he's like, that thing that you resist that you know you should go do, you need to go do that thing. And that to me
Yeah.
is a very, very like golden rule. Like a lot of times, now there may be times where you shouldn't, and you got to be able to cipher. Should I go hang out with this friend tonight when they're going to be drinking and doing drugs or whatever, and I'm in high school? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? But you have to take in reference, like you said, depending on the situation. But he talks about how he calls it the resistance, where he wanted to write for a long, long time. And so he started to write, or he wrote for decades, didn't have success until he was 52. But even still, as a writer, he's now he's 80. He still writes, still feels like most of his stuff is shit.
Yeah.
And he still feels that resistance to not write, to make excuses not to write, knowing that something inside of him is calling him to go do that thing, which is your purpose, which is the reason, whatever it is. We all have these whispers and these voices inside of us that talk to us all the time. It's just a matter of whether or not we tune in and listen to them.
Yes.
So I feel like you can dull that whisper if you don't pay attention to it. But if you do listen, it's always there and it's always going to come back. Just like I said, those people that are 80 years old that feel like they should go start working out.
Mm-hmm.
They've been being told that for 60 years.
Right.
So that's been in their head for 60 years. They just never they just never went and did it. But to me, and this is what like I really appreciate hitting on it, is that we just got to be like, F it, go do it. You know what I'm saying? Whatever the thing is, like go at least try. Go start it. Give it 3 weeks. I always tell people, I know people that don't like to sweat, so that's why that's their excuse not to work out. And I'm just like, man, dude, like the benefits are so much more important than, because those same people are stressed and depressed and have anxiety. And I'm just like, dude, and they've said it, and that's what they said in the book, The Spark, that if they could recommend anything as a pill that would be the most benefit for all of mankind or all of the Western culture, it would be exercise in a pill form for 30 minutes a day. Would be without all the side effects that you get with the current medication.
Right.
It's exercise, because you get to release. You feel better now. Doesn't matter if you're fat. Doesn't matter if you're overweight. Doesn't matter that you don't have a six-pack when you're done. Just be getting active and walking for 30 minutes. Or you don't have to go run. You don't have to go lift. You don't have to be a jiu-jitsu guy. Just go do something. Just go for a walk. Like take a walk, man.
Yeah.
Like get out and walk for 30 to 45 minutes. Is it going to hurt your ankles if you haven't walked for a while? You're like, maybe. But who cares? What are you going to do? It's going to be a little bit sore. And then do the same thing tomorrow, or do it 2 days from now. And then just keep doing it and start to see. I've heard all these recent people, like podcast people and people that try and talk about like how awesome walking is. And it really is true. Like I do jiu-jitsu and I hit the heavy bag and I prefer that.
Right.
But I went for a walk in the morning at 5 o'clock a few weeks back. And I was like, this is the shit. Like I just going for a walk and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, this is awesome. No one's out there. You feel like you're a champion just because everyone else is still asleep. Walking with the dog, 45, 50 minutes. I was like, this is awesome. Like, so there's so much truth to it, and you don't have to do a lot. It's not like you have to go be an Anthony. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to go do CrossFit. You don't have to go do, I'd like you to go do jiu-jitsu and hit the heavy bag and stuff like that, because it's next level. But just do something. You know what I mean? Do something, because it makes you feel so much better. And all we do is, if we don't go get active or don't do something, all we do is sit on the couch or sit on our phone and feel depressed.
Yeah, and I always anymore, like I look at it and it's like, all right, so we're recording on, like to release on Spotify, and we're using a Zoom and all this technology and these phones, right? So like it's cool, and it provides you a lot of opportunities, but at the same time there are a whole lot of people that are using the same stuff to keep you sedentary. Like they want your attention, and
Absolutely.
they want you to be a lazy fat loser. That's what they want.
And whether they realize it or not, I think some people, because I've had many people on podcast content say, hey, technology is awesome, but it's also like you're sitting here listening to
100%.
If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A video that has 500 million views is people sitting there watching it most of the time.
Yeah.
Like I'll listen to motivational stuff when I'm lifting,
Right.
But in general,
I listen to podcasts now when I'm training.
You know what I mean? So like, but I think that's super important, man, and I really appreciate you touching on it.
But I look at it from like, all right, all these people want me to sit on the couch and do nothing, so fuck them. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm going to be the counterculture to
Yeah.
that. Like that's always kind of, I think anybody that's like aggressive, forward pushing mindset, like there's part of that where it's like, No, like you don't get to tell me what to do. I'm gonna elicit, like, in effect, my actions onto this world and this planet, and you're not gonna get me to sit on the couch and just be a slug.
I love it, man. And I think for you, when you said that, for me, it was weird how it hit for the fact that, like, I've always said I was going to do a podcast or want to do a podcast, and I just never have because sharing this stuff, you have no idea who it's going to hit, who it's going to touch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the cool part about it,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because all you're trying to do is get people active. You know what I'm saying? In general, at least I am. You know what I mean? Like I just go do something, man. I'd love it for people to come to do. I wish everybody did jiu-jitsu. I wish everybody hit the heavy bag, but they don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this with jujitsu, like this is I always kind of dabbled in it, like, you know, going through police academy, and I wrestled a little bit in high school, and so like I'm not a stranger to it. But when I really started doing it, and it's like, you know, 5-10 minutes with a dude who's way better than you and just like crushing you, and it's not like wrestling where it's like, all right, you pin and you get up. It's kind of it's quicker. You know what I mean? Like it's more intense, but it's quicker, and like, but with jujitsu, like when I first started really training, and it was really clear that there's a whole lot of like just random dudes that are better than big tough SWAT guy, right?
Yeah.
And I was getting my ass kicked, and it was like I wanted to cry because it was so like emotionally draining in a sense.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about jujitsu in like specifically that where it's like it elicits such an emotional response?
I think personally, because I've seen that and experienced it a lot over the years, I think that people, it's like universes, right? Like different universes, parallel universes, whatever you want to call it. Like if I walked into the SWAT world and you went on a raid with you, I'd be out of my mind because I've never done it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it would be, for you, it'd be like going to work every day, right? But if I haven't done it and put myself in there, even though I think I'm a pretty tough guy and I think that I've seen a lot of different shit, going on a raid with you, if I don't know what's going on, I could get lost and I'd be worried about getting shot, could get shot, could whatever, because I don't know the way that you guys operate. Does that make sense? Maybe it's not a good example, but you have a lot more comfort there, right, than I would. And so this, because it's human chess, it's one of those things that people don't realize. I've always been pleasantly surprised when I teach somebody how to throw a punch or a kick. And they're like, wow, I never knew that there like so much went into throwing a punch. You know what I'm saying? Because every dude thinks they can throw a punch, right?
Right.
And most of them can, but it doesn't mean it's the right punch or the right kind of punch or the most powerful punch, but they can throw it. So what happens in jiu-jitsu is that you expose yourself to what you don't know. You know what I'm saying? Because two bodies together, how often does that happen where you interlock with somebody else and you're trying to submit each other with an elbow lock, a wrist lock, a neck choke, a heel hook, a knee bar, knee on belly? It doesn't happen that often. You know what I'm saying? It's not something that happens to anybody in everyday life. And I say that it's even less for 98% of women. You know what I mean? That's why I wish more women did it, because women don't engage in that. They never feel that kind of pressure. They never feel someone pushing on them and pulling on them unless it's in jiu-jitsu or wrestling, but most women don't wrestle. So the ones that do come and try jiu-jitsu, it's way even more extreme for them but there's a lot of guys that haven't felt that either. And it's just such a different experience, especially if you go with somebody that knows what they're doing, who can maneuver and manipulate in ways that you feel like the big, strong body, my big muscle-bound body should be able to handle this, or this guy should never be able to move me this way or that way, because it's a counterbalance. It's balance and counterbalance. It's where you are and where you're not. It sounds weird, but that's what happens all the time. I always tell people that, like, it's sometimes resistance on resistance, and sometimes it's going around that resistance. Sometimes it's going away to where there is no resistance and then coming back to a position where you're in a better spot. When that happens to a person and they've never felt it, and or they dominate somewhere else. They could be a business owner. They could be a SWAT guy. They could be a special forces guy. If they've not done that before and experienced it, and they go against somebody that's good, it's a whole nother world.
You know, I think there's a whole lot of that it's like, I like looking back on it, like I felt helpless.
Yeah.
Like I am, you know, 200 plus pounds, been on a SWAT team forever, done all this CrossFit and lifting, and, you know, like
strong dude, athletic dude, in shape.
And I come and just get buried by
Mm-hmm.
dudes, and it's like this guy's 150 pounds and he is kicking my
Yeah.
ass, or he weighs the same as me, and now I feel pressure and like I'm helpless. He's literally killing me,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then understanding like now you got 5 more minutes of this,
Yeah.
and
I think it's a deep Don't you think it's a deep psychological experience?
it's hugely emotional, psychological, like and working and being able to work through that, from a physical context. Like I always say, like the intersection of like mental health, like physical health, like they overlap, right?
Mm-hmm.
But physical health is way more of a low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So like I can work through, and part of it is like you're the same as me, like we've been physical our whole lives,
Mm-hmm.
so I can work through a lot of mental and emotional stuff by physically doing things like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then like when I went in and really started training,
Mm-hmm.
I get this experience of being just beaten up and helplessly like crushed and like
Yeah.
held down by another man.
Yeah.
That's hard to deal with, uh, and it's like, okay, now what's my option? I give up and leave and never come back, and
Which
then
a lot of do.
and then I never process this, right?
Yeah.
Or I start working through it, and in the process of working through this, I realize like, all right, I can learn and get better and improve, and I'm a beginner here, and like
Yeah.
like you got to go back to the beginner mindset, and then but it helps you realize so much about yourself.
I love that, and I
And-
love that you're saying that because it's the truth.
Yeah.
And that statement that you just made to me is the essence of why people should do jujitsu. Because if you come, say you're a person that comes and gets beat up on, right? Say we used to have this too, Anthony, with guys that were fighters, street fighters, and come in and think that they were gonna do some MMA and spar and like beat people's asses, and they'd get punched and kicked, and we'd be taking it easy on them. Me and Rico used to be like my brother. We'd be like pop, 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 boom, and we weren't hurting them, we weren't hitting them, but we were touching them and letting them know
Yeah.
that hey, could have got you there, could have
Yep.
got you there, and they're like, whoa, they want to go after, they go harder, they miss, you take them down, you control them. It's that, right? Same situation. But when they have that, and to me, it's a lack of emotion. It's like I don't want to say lack because it's a choice not to continue to engage in that. So instead of confronting that and saying, which is what we've done and which we're talking about, why do we do the things that we keep doing? Why do we go into that fear, and just do the thing? It's because we want to get better, right? We want to get better for ourselves. I always call it the dragon. I call it the dark space, whether it's fatigue or a helpless situation. If you face it, the better you get, the longer you stay, you can push that dragon further out. Does that make sense? To where you feel, and you grow in that process. It's inevitable. You grow through that process. So if you stay, it's like they say, if you stay, you're gonna get better. Period.
Yeah.
Right? 6 months, a year from now, somebody else that was similar to how you felt is gonna be coming through,
Right.
and they're gonna experience that same thing.
Well, and even if, let's say, like worst case scenario, right? Like even if I start jujitsu and I physically don't improve, the fact that I'm putting myself in that stressful situation
Yes.
of getting clobbered,
Yeah.
it means that like I'm gonna acclimate myself to it and I'm not gonna freak out as much.
Mhm.
So even if I physically don't improve as much as I wanted to, or it's like slow or whatever,
Yeah.
like you're still gonna be mentally getting better. Emotionally, you're getting better. Like it is helping you through a lot of things that maybe you don't see.
I
And-
think that that's the essence. So that's what I think, that because when I did, I hadn't done the Breakfast Club in a long time, and I did it this past Friday, and I remember feeling towards the end of it like, I feel like I'm a champion today. I feel like I've won the day. I won. Today's won, just because I did that hour workout first thing in the morning. Everything else is a plus. Going to work is a plus. Taking care of the kids the rest of the day. Anything that I did the rest of the day, I felt was like a win. Isn't that interesting? Because I just went and did this physically hard thing, and I was tired, breathing heavier later in the round, 45, 50 minutes. It was hot.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's what I'm talking about. That's what we're chasing is that, and I think as human beings, we're always chasing that. Whether we want to admit it or not, or whether we accept the challenge or not.
Yeah.
You can sidestep it and be like, nope, not going to engage in that. Those are the people who don't work out, don't exercise, don't put themselves into hard situations. That's why wrestling is so badass, because you're forced to do that immediately, and that's why it's not for everybody. And if you're
Yeah.
not in high school and college, because it's hard immediately, and if you're out of shape, you're going to know immediately. And if you're wrestling somebody that's way better than you, they're going to kick the shit out of you, and it's not going to be fun at all. Way worse than wrestling. I mean, jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
because you take somebody down on a double and you land your shoulder in them. It's like it sucks. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Jiu-jitsu sucks from a submission standpoint.
Yes.
You've heard the Joe Rogans, the Dana Whites, all these other people that talk about when they first went in and got their asses kicked. Everyone says the same thing.
Well, yeah, and I think it's not just like you have to submit when, like, you get me in an arm bar, like,
Yeah.
I have to submit on my break, but you have to submit to the process as a whole and be like, okay, I am not strong enough to force this. Like, I
Yes.
have to take a slower roll
Yep.
and then humble myself.
Yeah.
You know?
And then
you
figure it
have to.
out.
You have to. It's like total submission in a lot of different ways.
I love it, and
Yeah.
to me, that's the point.
You know what always also I think is real interesting, like difference between like CrossFit super intense, jiu-jitsu can be super intense, is the act of like you can't do jiu-jitsu without touching another person.
Right.
Like, so that physical closeness
Yep.
is super uncomfortable for a lot of people, and I don't think it should be, and I don't think it used to be, like 100 200 years ago. I think that the fact that we're so technologically advanced and we're so isolated in a lot of ways that that we're missing this component of physical touch.
Yeah, I
like,
agree 100%.
We're missing it.
Yeah. I wonder if I wonder if it is different now than what it would have been 200 years. I think that your small group of people like us that are okay with it or at least become okay with it, has always been a small group. Like, and that's why you don't see more women doing it, and that's why you don't see more men doing it, and that's why you don't see, because people think that they get to a certain age and now they're too old to do it. Jiu-jitsu you can do till you're 60, 70 years old, and you may adjust. You may not go with the 22-year-old badass.
Right.
You may go with somebody else. And,
that's what I'm trying to do.
You know what I'm saying? You may chill and go here, but you can still do the work. And that's what I love about it. And to me, that's the point. So I don't know, because granted, I know I have a couple cousins, both really good athletes, pretty boys, look good, whatever. They've always been like, oh, I don't want some other dude grabbing on me. I don't want somebody else. That's bull. I don't want that. And I'm always just like, you got to try it, bro. Because if you try it, you'll understand. And I say this to everybody. I say this to the world because it's the voice I get to have just because we're here. And who knows if it's one person or 10 people that listen to this someday. But when you do it, it changes you.
Yeah.
You change. And when you stay the course, because it becomes this like me against me thing. Okay, I did this thing. It's uncomfortable. Kind of got my ass beat. Do I say, not for me, and now I don't come back and confront that thing? Now it's not confronted forever or until you come back. Or do I say, you know what? I'm going to learn how to get better because I'm uncomfortable, because I'm not that good at it. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to see if I can get better. And almost inevitably, everybody's going to get better. The longer you do it, the better you're going to get. So a year from now, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, you're in a whole different place and space. And then you're not talking anymore about the discomfort. You're talking about how you feel after you're done, the euphoria, the connection, I always feel like a champ when I'm done, no matter what. It's always like after I've done that 45 minutes to an hour and 15-minute workout.
Yeah, and you know what I love too about it is the dynamic is that every role is different.
Yes.
Everything is different. You're never going to have that same exact experience again.
Yep.
Like it's there and it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's like as much as we might roll and you always do knee on belly, it's like it's different.
Yep.
It's different in the way you do it, where it's applied, how I'm doing it, how I'm choosing to react to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you're getting better at defending it too.
Yeah.
Because eventually it could become a non-thing for you because you get so good at defending it, anticipating it, you block it. Now you've evolved. Now you've elevated.
Right.
Now it's not as effective on you as it once was. That's great. To me, it's great for you because you've gotten better at your defense, and it's great because I've had to adjust and learn how to do something else.
And like I said, even though you might hit me with it, I don't freak out the same way.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's better. Like
Yes.
that is better.
That's an improvement.
Just
Yes.
an improvement right there.
Yeah.
Like
Because
physically,
it sucks for
maybe I
you
didn't
when you
change.
first start and you've never felt it.
And it's terrifying
It's
and
terrifying,
it hurts, and all of a
scary.
sudden it's like I've seen this before. It's okay.
Yeah.
And
you start to know that it's
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
You're saying so like you faced the fear and said, you know what, hey, it wasn't that bad. Yeah,
Right.
it sucked, but it's not as bad anymore because I know what's up. That's the beauty of it, and that to me is the trick, I always think about how do I reach more people to get them to step across the line, to get on the mat for jiu-jitsu, for wrestling, for learning some boxing, kickboxing. And I can't do anything but try to get inside their heads and their heart and just say, man, if you've thought about it, if you're thinking about it in any way, shape, or form, just come check it out. You know what I mean? And 95% of the time, at least, I think we've done a pretty good job of that. But most people in jiu-jitsu are not assholes, and they're going to show you, and they're going to help
really
you,
not.
and they're going to be nice to you, and they're going to say, hey, man, try this, or hey, man, try that.
I mean, and you want to talk about like an eclectic, diverse, quote unquote, group of people. Like,
100%, yeah.
It is such a more like interesting group than CrossFit gyms I've been to.
Really?
You know what I mean? Oh yeah, like people from everywhere.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, you get
some whack jobs, but
Yeah,
you get a lot of normal people too.
right. I mean, you get bankers, you get cops, you get
Yep.
stoners, you
Yep.
get like
Everything.
You get the mix, man. You get every race, religion, like, and that's just here.
Yeah.
You know, like in bigger cities, I'm sure it's
even crazier.
Yeah.
But I love that part
Yes.
of it. Very
Yes.
cool to see. I've been super grateful, man, that you and your community, because I have a lot more police officers in just my group. Like I go to get a grip. I float to Gracie now too, and I'll go do their open mats at lunch at times.
Mhm.
It's just really cool, man. It's really cool to see. I think that it's probably one of the best things police officers can do to stay active, to help them, like you said, be more comfortable. Because they don't get put into those situations sometimes. And I know you know guys in the force that they don't do any kind of that type of training. I just think it's good to do for your well-being, for your physicality.
Yeah. Well, who was I talking to? Oh, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Aaron Giannetti. He owns a CrossFit. Well, technically not really CrossFit anymore, but he owns a gym. He's a big Krav Maga guy.
Okay.
I think he's a brown belt, soon to blue black belt in jiu-jitsu too.
Hmm.
But we were talking about this stuff a couple weeks ago, and you know, he's talking about things from a self-defense standpoint, and like how important striking is for self-defense, because you create distance and get away.
Yeah.
And you know, I didn't really bring it up at the time, but for law enforcement, like jiu-jitsu and wrestling are so important. I don't know that I would say it's more or less than striking, because strikes are still super important.
Yeah.
But every time that I go to arrest someone, every time, 100% of the time, it is grappling.
Yeah.
Even if it's compliance, I'm putting you in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Like, I am taking you, I'm grappling with you.
Mhm.
You're compliant, but I'm grappling with you to put you in handcuffs.
Yeah.
That happens 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, jiu-jitsu at least gives you practice in position.
Mhm.
So if something happens, when something happens, and you wind up on the ground with somebody, you're like, oh, I've been here once or twice.
Been here many times.
Yeah.
I think that's the best benefit, and that's why I think training wrestling takedowns with jiu-jitsu, so not necessarily doing wrestling, but just the movements of level change to a double, or underhooked, or a snap down to front headlock, a 2-on-1, a foot sweep, any of those things, high single, high double, and adding to the jiu-jitsu side for police officers is something that would dramatically, like, I think it makes them 10 times more effective with less energy, more effectiveness to get the person to where they want them to do, to comply, whatever. And it also probably, I don't know, because I'm not you, but like, I would imagine that it would help for those people that are coked out of their mind or on meth or whatever, that are going to be spastic the whole time that you're trying to lock them down to get them into cuffs.
Yeah, and so much from a wrestling standpoint, like knowing how to take them down at your discretion, how you want to do it, and then also top pressure.
Yeah.
Like as a cop, like top pressure is so important, and you have to be able to do that. Like what you teach, like body surfing.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And then jiu-jitsu helps especially if you get stuck on the bottom, or you get in a shitty spot.
Yeah.
It's like, I know how to escape this. I know how to get an underhook from the bottom.
Yeah.
So that I can reverse this and get back on top and stay on top.
Yeah, I love it. That's why I think it's awesome, and something that would be super benefit. I think I've said that, we've talked about this in the past, but I think all police officers should be doing that, even just specific to police officers, even if they just want to do it for police officers, not even like 10 groups of 10 to 20 police officers. Hey, here's some wrestling stuff, here's some hip positioning, here's some redirecting people, here, there, under, over, how to fake and hit a snap down, an underhook, whatever, blast, double, single.
Right.
And then, like you said, once I get down to the ground, how to put knee on belly, how to float on the body, how to move from here to here to here to here, and not ever be able to get swept, myself, from top, and then to maintain control no matter where they go.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's huge.
Yes.
And also, and we've talked about this a lot in the past, stuff that happens to where I can do it so efficiently and effectively that I'm not I'm not hurting them because I did something way more extreme because I didn't know any better that broke a bone or that hurt or choked him or made him pass out. Or, you know what I'm saying? You're hyper aware of
Yes.
what you're doing.
And to go along with that, you also have the experience and the knowledge to go, all right, I know that this is escalating to a point that it's like out of control and I am in danger, right?
Yeah.
And then I know how to escalate that, and it, like say it rises to a lethal force situation where I can use the same things in that situation.
Yeah.
And when it's appropriate and when it's not, and then you can accurately identify it's time to take this to the next level,
Yes.
or it's time to back it down.
Yeah.
You know, and don't juice this wrist lock as hard
Yes.
as you were. You know,
I would ask you if you think, because to me that sounds super, super important, like to know, and that there's a lot of people out there probably that don't know. So they go to that extreme situation, that lethal situation, probably way sooner than they had to because they haven't done this work.
Well, and then you start looking into case law and application of things, and it's like, well, there's a lot of justified lethal force engagements that if you were better, you maybe wouldn't have had to take it that far.
Maybe,
you know, like I hate armchair quarterbacking everybody. Like, you know, body cams are everywhere now, and everybody wants to do that, but you see a whole lot of justified shootings where it's like, well, if he could have just taken that dude down and hit him a couple times and put him in a Kimura, he might not have had to escalate that because it would have been in control faster.
I would imagine. I don't know, but I agree with you 100%. And I would, myself personally, want to waver on knowing enough so that I wouldn't have had to take it to that. And if I did, it was justified always, and that I knew, hey, that was my last resort because I know my stuff enough and I feel enough and know enough about another human body in comparison to mine to know when it's time and when not. But I think that that's probably something in that community that could use a lot of work.
Yeah, and then that would actually alleviate a lot of stress because there's a whole lot of cops that run around scared. And it's like you're not going to be as scared if you understand what you're capable of and how things feel and when exactly. Like I know where my line is.
Yeah.
Like if I'm on a traffic stop and I get a dude that blast doubles me right out of the gate and I'm like, oh shit, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I know that it feels like a blast double from you.
Yeah.
I know I'm in trouble.
It's already time.
I know I am in some serious shit.
Yeah.
And I need to escalate this immediately or I'm going to die.
Yep.
Right? Versus if I don't train like that, I'm going to be completely confused on what's going on. It's going to take me way longer to like perceive it, you know, and decide what to do and then what's appropriate and then what do I know how to do, and by then you're going to be dead.
Exactly.
You know, or seriously injured.
I think that that's super important, and I think that it would behoove that industry as a whole to make people do some of those things because it'll change your life. You know what I mean? I mean, think about it. Think about how many things that people, because that's real stuff, man. You're talking about somebody who's potentially taking somebody's life, and they may not have had to because they didn't run around being in fear because they know personally that, hey man, I don't really know about a lot about this, like physical contact with somebody else.
Right.
But they'll never tell you that. They're never going to come out and say that. You know what I'm saying? They're not even going to say it to a counselor after it happens.
No.
They're not going to ever admit to that fear, and that's going to stay in them and live inside them.
That'll eat them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to me, you know, it makes the most sense, and I know it's probably not going to happen because we've had this conversation before, but that's why I think that it falls on the individual.
And it definitely does, because what you're talking about from a training standpoint is like if we go back to what you said about being in big army, right? That's every police department is big army. Mm-hmm. Like the term training to the least common denominator. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, we can't do this because it's too advanced. It's like, okay, well, we're not the big army. Like we don't have thousands and thousands and thousands, you know?
Yeah.
Like we can do this.
I've heard that some cities in America have started to force their police departments to doing more jiu-jitsu or more type of training. Is that the case or no?
Yeah, it's they've gone more to it. What was that?
I think your connector, maybe.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, they've gone more to it. But the issue with a lot of it is like you learn moves, but you don't learn how to use the moves.
We're talking about the same thing. Meaning, how I would serve. This is how I would serve. Me being me, you know me, and you've rolled with me. I would say, hey man, let me come in. and all we're gonna do is I'm gonna lay down on the ground, and your guys are just gonna go hold me down.
Yeah.
And because that gets to the essence of what you're talking about.
Yep.
I'm not going to try and submit them. All I'm going to do is invert, get them out of position, sweep them, end up on top of them, and I'm not going to say anything about submissions or anything else. I'm going to positionally make them get to that vulnerable spot, like you just said, that could happen on the street at any time. Somebody's coked out of their mind, 300-pound dude,
Yeah.
steroid taking person.
Yep.
You understand what I'm saying? And say, look, this is what we can improve at. If you just show up. You 10, 15, 20 guys, whoever it is. I'm not going to do anything to hurt your ego. I'm not going to try and submit you and hurt you. I'm not going to try and prove a point because that's what every police officer fears is this dude going to be an asshole and try and rip on my knee or rip on my ankle or break my arm or wrist because I'm a police officer and I don't know this dude?
Well, I've been to gyms like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, is that your squad car? I'm like, yeah. And then all of a sudden they crank it up and it's like, dude, I ain't coming back here.
Yeah,
you know,
100%. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But my thing is, for me, being me as a person, I would offer up to them to say, I'll come to your space. All we got to do is have a 20 by 20 mat or a 10 by 10 mat, and you can just send guys in for 10, 15 minutes, and I know that I'm good enough and that I can handle myself enough that I would be able to at least make them realize, even not through submission, but just realize a movement where they're vulnerable and where they're not. To me, that's the essence of what you're talking about, that they need to spend time playing with. They just need to spend time in those situations so they can learn how to get out of them and not be in them.
I like that you said playing in those positions, and that's really what we miss. Like as adults, we miss that, but especially as cops, like we don't play. Like we're playing. Like everything that we do is very like here's a move. Here's choreograph. Here's this. Like it's not play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be super beneficial. And then all the guys that I know a good amount of guys. I always say the same thing, and they all say the same thing, that they wish everyone did it too. And sometimes they do it, but as a open invite, I'd be happy to come and just roll with everyone and not even submit, just move them and just have them feel. Because then you can do it on your feet too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is how I feel if you locked up with a guy like me on the street, boop, 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 and positionally. You know what I'm saying? Because you understand positionally how different that is to lock up with somebody that knows how to move their body. A high-level wrestler is different than somebody that you just come across on the street. A high school wrestler or athlete, the way that you can move your hips and foot sweep and maintain position and control, or not get thrown myself because somebody tries to throw me. You know what I'm saying? Like that's another level of balance and position that I think adds a ton of value. But the thing is that for all of this, we never get there unless we go through the journey. You can't just get there. You don't just arrive there. You don't just get to where you understand those positions. You have to actually do the reps, which is thousands upon thousands of reps, and or feel that position over and over and over again. And that's what's missing, in my opinion. It's just that, hey, feel the position, get to here and see how it feels against somebody that really knows what they're doing. So then you can improve on that yourself.
Yeah.
And then hopefully never have to come across somebody like that. But if you do, then you know it right now that you have to go to excessive force because you're in a situation that...
Well, in that case, it would be appropriate force.
Exactly, appropriate force. So I'm saying, sorry. But I mean, to me, that excessive is appropriate force. It's the right approach. It's the right of force that is needed right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm in a situation where I know it's like, I don't know, man.
You're outgunned and you can't lose.
Yes.
Like that's basically what it is.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so you got to go there. And that's your guys' call. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lifelong thing, because I don't care if you're a police officer. I don't care if you're... I was listening to Eddie get one of his, not podcasts, but like a little post the other day, and he was talking about when he would go on deployments and kissing his kids. I sent it to you, I thought, with... Yeah,
I watched that.
Very deep stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's real shit for cops, because you never know. And you hear it all the time. People that... You know what I mean? You it's real stuff. You know?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of equated to, and I was never in the military, so I don't know what a deployment's like.
Yeah.
But I always kind of look at like what we do on a daily basis is like a mini deployment.
Heck
like
yeah.
Because you have to go into that zone. You have to kind of work yourself up. You have little rituals you do. You go to work. You do the shit. You know. And and you know, I don't care where you're a cop, you're gonna do and see things that most people will never even realize is happening down the street from their house.
100%.
And then you got to come back and be dad and
be
take care of the house.
You gotta be normal.
You got landscaping and
Yeah.
dogs that wear diapers.
It's
and
crazy shit, bro. Like, it really is crazy, man. And most everyday people don't care or don't realize that.
And that constant mental transition, it can be very difficult. And then if you're on like a call out team, like I'm on like our SWAT team, it's like you might get called out and it's like, okay, got to go.
Yeah.
And then you got to go back into that zone and then do that like multiple times in a day and
Yeah.
sleep and that kind of stuff. And
I
it's just-
commend you, man. Like, that's the realest of the real. Like, that's the realest of the real, in my opinion. Like, and if you've never been in it or you're not in it, you'll never understand it. You know what I mean? And I don't even understand it or appreciate it as much because I'm not in it. But to me, that's the realest. It's like when I talk about getting in the cage. I've never been in a shootout, but when that door shuts behind you and you're in a cage, it's you and that person across from you. Somebody's coming out a winner, somebody's coming out a loser, and there's a really high potential that you're going to get hurt in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
You're getting punched in the face or kicked in the face or the ribs or whatever. It's as real as it's surreal, and it's as real as it gets, man.
Yeah.
Because there's no one else out there but you. So try to be prepared as best you can. That's all I can say, or that's how I feel. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and then the question becomes like, how do we reach people that don't choose to do it? Because like, as much as we think that, I've got my opinions on how we could do it from a departmental standpoint.
yeah,
it's not going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
like, how do we reach people to get them to take action in doing this stuff on their own?
I think it's things like this. I think it's the podcast.
Yeah.
I think it's the algorithm of them seeing something enough or them being touched. Because I don't care who you are, everyone thinks about these things. So if you're a police officer, if you're in a SWAT, you think about the things that we're talking about. If you're overweight, if you're not overweight, but you feel like you're not healthy, you're thinking about what you need to do today, but you don't do it. You have a conversation every day with yourself, whether you want to admit it or not, that says, I should go do some biceps today. I should do some push-ups right now in the space that I'm in. Nah, I'm going to watch this show. Nah, I'm going to go grab something to eat upstairs. Nah, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so, right? Or I'm having a shitty day. Every day, those conversations, it's the subconscious, it's the universe. I don't know, but I know today because I've spent enough time talking to enough people and I've seen it and experienced enough myself that people are having these conversations with themselves every single day, and it's the resistance and it's the fear, and you need to stop. Pardon my language, but I'll say this because it'll hit home. Stop being a bitch and go do the thing that you need to do. And I mean that in the most respectful way.
Yeah.
Because you're having a conversation with yourself. You meaning whoever ever listens, the universe already knows, like, you're having these conversations every day no matter what. And you either choose to address them, engage, or you don't. And that over time affects you as a human being and that's why I say when I go do jiu-jitsu or I go lift weights in the morning, I go walk, or just getting that, if I don't work out in the morning, which I don't sometimes, I have to do my lunch workout. Or if I don't work out at lunch, by the time it's nighttime, if I haven't decided to take that day off, I'm like, it's there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we've trained it to be there. Because if that's not there, then something else is there. And I can't tell you how many people I know, and I don't know how they do it, man. They sit and they don't work out ever. I'm just like, I don't even know. I don't want to know what that would be like because I don't know. That to me is the most odd thing. But I'm the weirdo to them.
Right.
Like, hey, you work out too much. Why do you do what you do? Because it makes you feel good. That's why. And that's in the end why we're all here. We want to feel good and live with intention and connect with people and have good relationships and with family, with kids, with loved ones, that's it. It's all about relationships and feeling good and feeling like you're serving a purpose and you're helping people. That's it. You know what I mean? In my opinion. Sorry, that's my phone. Turn it off.
No, it's all good. I think that's a pretty good place to kind of wrap it up, man.
All right, brother.
That kind of encompassed all the stuff we were talking about. But if people are trying to find you, is there anywhere that they can get more information from you? Or
Yeah, I mean, generics, basic Facebook, Instagram. For now, I don't have any websites or anything. I probably always think about it, but you can always find me at Anton Telementes. And there's not too many of those, I don't think, on Facebook and then Instagram as well. But yeah, that's it, man. And always call me. I put my number out there. I don't care. It's 260-310-9217. I think is what it is. I think that's right. I'm not sure. 310-9217. I think. I don't know. If not, I'll get it to you. But that's it, man. And then I'm always available. And I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me as
Yeah,
well.
dude, this was fun.
I didn't know what to expect, and I was just like, hey, I'm sure we'll have a good time.
All right. It's just like after jiu-jitsu class.
That's exactly right, bro.
Well, cool, man. Well, thanks a ton.
All right, bro.